What's going on, narrators? It's Morris again. We're back with the Narrators Per Possession podcast. And we're starting to switch gears a little bit. And I'm excited for tonight because we're going to get into another sort of off-season theme podcast. We've talked about the Magic so far, their off-season. We've talked about the Raptors. Tonight, I'm excited to bring as a guest Dalton, who runs the website Behind the Bucks Pass, and we're going to get into a lot of Milwaukee Bucks ins and outs. There's been a lot of headlines, a lot of storylines, and I'm really excited to bring him up to the stage. But before I do that, just want please, for you watching the video, please give us a like, a subscribe, leave a comment. That's all cool and helps us out here at Narrators Per Possession. And so without that further ado, I'm going to bring up Dalton, man. Dalton, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. Definitely excited to get into your team, the Milwaukee Bucks, because it's just, I think, given, having a player of the caliber of Giannis, right, and there's, year in, year out, I'm sure high expectations for what that franchise wants to accomplish. There's definitely been a lot of interesting storylines, which, I'm excited to get into. And before we get into those, I just to kind of level set or set the stage for it. I mean, from an outsider perspective, it looked like, the 24-25 Bucks had a good season, debatable if it's, considered great, but at least from the standpoint of 4-8 win regular season for the Bucks, 11th in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating, finished with a 5 seed, so, top 6 playoff team at least. Had a unfortunate sort of gentleman sweep at the hands of the eventual Eastern Conference champ Pacers, but on the whole, seemed like a solid season, given some ups and downs. And so I'd say all that just to sort of tee that up for you. How, from your perspective personally, and then I guess for the Bucks fan base, what's kind of the retrospective feeling on how that season went?
Yeah, there was potential there, but they never really put all the pieces together. There were glimmers in there. Like you said, they did win 48 games. That was good, but they never really clicked. The whole Giannis and Dame era can kind of be described as they never really clicked. They were the highest scoring duo, of course. That was great, but never really connected as well. Middleton was hurt a lot. That certainly hurt. Once they traded out Kuzma for Middleton, it kind of felt like, okay, maybe we're looking ahead to the offseason a little bit, trying to get out of that second apron to set ourselves up for more moves. But also at the trade deadline, bringing in guys like Jericho Sims and Kevin Porter Jr., who could help you get a little bit of a head start for the offseason as you try to incorporate more youth and all that, which they've done a pretty good job of. But really just a disjointed season, a lot of moving parts that didn't really make a lot of sense. Drafting A.J. Johnson, 24th overall, when he was 19 at the time. It felt like they would have maybe taken a more seasoned guy. Instead, they take a 19-year-old and then they trade him a couple months later. So just a lot of moves that kind of scratching your head a little bit, but I feel like the vision is a lot more clear heading into this offseason, especially after a lot of the moves that we've seen so far.
Yeah. Again, just sort of outside perspective, my hot take reaction to it. I mean, certainly it looks like the Bucks have restocked depth to at least maintain a status quo level, or maybe maintain a floor at least, and ideally make another move or two to try to reload and make a serious push into the playoffs next season.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole offseason's been really a big change. They've made quite a few moves that, a lot of scrutiny from the outside a little bit, but internally it's okay, I see what you're building here. They wanted to get a younger and more athletic roster, which is what us Bucks fans have kind of been preaching for the past few months, and they finally listened. So it's going to be different. It's going to be a different team in Milwaukee next season compared to what they were this past season or even the year before that. So kind of looking forward to seeing the changes.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I'll just run down the list of these offseason changes because, it's been a pretty active offseason for the Bucks. So, just from the category of first, extending current Milwaukee Bucks, right? So Bobby Portis gets an extension. Gary Trent Jr. gets an extension. Kevin Porter Jr., Taurean Prince, Ryan Rollins. So five guys on the roster right now. So re-up them, and then externally, probably the blockbuster move, right? Going to get Miles Turner from, I guess, like, would you consider the Pacers to be like, I mean, it is like at this point a legit rivalry between like Bucks and Pacers. Seems like it at least.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Definitely with everything that's been going on, all of the things, like the Bucks and Celtics were a rivalry a couple of years ago, especially with that 2022 playoff series, but they never felt as like tension filled, I guess, because of all the external stuff going on, whether it was the Giannis game ball game where people were getting in each other's faces, Tyrese Halliburton's dad, holding the flag in Giannis's face after knocking the Bucks out. Bobby Portis, and he got into it with James Johnson one game, I think. So it's just like there's so much not on the court in terms of just who's winning and who's losing that I think really kind of has separated that in terms of a rivalry. So I'd absolutely consider it one.
Yeah, and I mean, just I think that's just going to bring an interesting dynamic when the next sort of Bucks Pacers dynamic goes around. And I know even like I didn't catch any of the clips, but it sounded like Miles Turner had like some eyebrow raising sort of like takes or comments from the Pacers fans' perspective, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. He didn't want to reveal too much, but it definitely sounded like things were going on behind the scenes a little bit there, maybe with some money with the franchise. I couldn't tell you the actual truth, but something going on there. And then the Bucks called and were like, "Hey, what do you think about Milwaukee?" And the rest is history from there. But yeah, no inside track there or anything like that. Just as stunned as everybody else. Did not expect that whatsoever. So I very shocked, and I'm interested to see how that plays into the rivalry next season and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, the other big sort of like new acquisition or new addition to the roster, you guys pick up Gary Harris as well. That should, I would imagine bring at least, some additional depth from like a wingish, guardish kind of defensive presence.
Interesting pickup. Had a really down year this year. Hasn't been quite the guy he used to be over the past couple of years, but looking at some numbers, he can still play some solid defense. He was mostly known for defense back in the day. Quality shooter, mostly a depth piece in my eyes. Coming in, being the backup to Gary Trent, AJ Green. Those are the guys that are going to get the most minutes at shooting guard, and see what Gary Harris has. It's a minimum deal. See what he's got. See if you can rehab him a little bit, make him into a strong piece. You never know. Just one of those guys that let's see what you got in them. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, interesting little pickup there. Did not have him on my radar, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, you mentioned the apron earlier. I think just to like balance that with also segue into some of the the moves out, some of the players that have been sort of departed from the roster. You bring Gary Harris on a cheap deal, but then also Pat Connaughton, he effectively gets salary dumped. He was traded for Vasil Micic, who then was like instantly waived, so you're carrying dead money for him. But certainly from a cap flexibility standpoint, I just happen to be looking at the Bucks cap sheet now underneath both aprons, and $20 million under the luxury tax. So certainly seems like the Bucks are keen on just kind of getting themselves in a good place financially as well, where they at least have the cap sheet to potentially make some more moves.
Yeah, it's crazy all the cap maneuvering that they've had to do to make all this work. Obviously they cut Lillard, but all the timing of their moves and all that, having to trade Connaughton, just doing everything they can to make sure they can re-sign all these guys, get Turner in there. They're working hard in that front office, at the calculators and all that, trying to make sure they get those numbers right. But like you alluded to, they're out of both aprons, and I certainly don't think they're done. I think we could certainly see some more. I know Miles Turner was the big addition. I don't think they'll get somebody bigger than that, but I think another move or two might be coming, whether it's through trade or just another free agent signing to round out that roster.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, another few days of summer league, so the whole league's kind of like sequestered in Vegas now. So who knows what kind of deals can pop out of that. And then I'm curious too. So also, the Bucks lose Brook Lopez through free agency as well. This is something else I'm curious, like just from a Bucks fan perspective, like how much of a pro, how much of a con is that sort of move, right? Because certainly he's a cornerstone of that championship team. He's going to be a legend there, I'm sure, forever. At the same time, the age to a degree is caught up with him. It seems like that was a logical sort of move that was going to happen at some point, especially if you're trying to get out of the apron.
Yeah, he'll, like you said, he'll always be a Milwaukee legend for helping in that title run. He had so many good performances. He was so good during that run. But it was a necessary evil. That's the way I described it. As much as everybody loved Brook Lopez, the person, he just didn't fit with the version of the team that they were trying to construct, trying to get younger, trying to get more athletic. He got played off the floor against Indiana in that first round series they just had because, he just couldn't keep up. Whenever a more athletic or younger guy went at him, he couldn't stay. So, Doc Rivers pulled the plug, put him on the bench. So it definitely felt like they were going to go in a different direction. And I knew somebody would pick him up. A lot of teams can use him, but for the vision of the Bucks roster, he didn't exactly fit in there. And the same thing with Pat Connaughton. It felt like they were going to dump him one way or another in a bigger trade, in a trade like this, just because while he was great during the title run, he just didn't really have the chops anymore, the athleticism, the mobility to impact the game like he did during that run. So it certainly felt like they were going to cut bait with some of the older players, and nobody beats Father Time, so it made a lot of sense. And you look at the roster now, you see the vision. They're looking to get younger, more athletic, and they've done that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, much more young. Yeah, to your point, younger depth on the roster, and certainly you want that to continue to extend or maximize the window of Giannis's prime. So in that sense. I would be curious as well. So, you've mentioned that you expect maybe one or two more moves to be made. Like, what are the ideal moves do you see being necessary to really round out the team? To ideally, I would expect, like, the expectation being, get this roster back into a serious title contention sort of form. Like, what would you be looking to do if you were the GM?
Yeah, I think they need another small forward. Any way that you can get it. You look at the roster, Taurean Prince is the only true small forward. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, Kuzma can be the 3. I don't really want to see a starting lineup with Kuzma, Turner, and Giannis. I feel like that'd be a bit clunky, maybe relying too much on size in your starting 5. I'd like to see a more natural small forward in there, and I don't really think Taurean Prince can be your starting small forward. I know he was with the Bucks last season, really dipped in the playoffs, so I feel like they got to go in there, get somebody else. The free agent market's kind of dry, so I'm keeping an eye out for trade. The Bucks do have their 2031 pick, very valuable pick. They have a 2032 as well. Maybe you swap them. Maybe you give them up outright. We'd have to see who's out there. I know Jonathan Kuminga has been linked to the Bucks by The Athletic. I do think that's pretty unlikely, but that could be your small forward right there. Keeping an eye, I was for a while on the Pelicans wings, Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, but doesn't seem like they're going to be on the move. So really just canvassing the market, keeping an eye out on small forwards who could be moved. RJ Barrett's a name a lot of Bucks fans have kind of pitched out there. I could see something like that. It's really guys who fit in that range of Kuzma's salary. Because ideally, if you got to give up Kuzma in that one of those picks, that's the move right there to get a small forward. So just looking at small forward, I think a trade is probably likely just because with everything they did with Lillard and Turner, they're eating a lot of dead money over the next few years. So it feels like the time, like, hey, if you're going to trade that pick and go all in, this feels like the time to do it rather than, okay, we're eating all this dead money from Dame, but, maybe we won't go all the way in. Maybe we'll keep this pick. No, I feel like if the right opportunity is there to get a small forward, a legitimate starting small forward, you trade that pick. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and I think that logic makes a lot of sense in this on two fronts. One, the fact that the Bucks are going to be eating Damian Lillard dead money until 2030, right? So that's already there. That's a sunk cost. You can't really do much with that. So you should try to maximize what you can get with your active salary, and then also, with Kyle Kuzma, I think you bring up a great point of. If you could turn Kyle Kuzma into a more effective small forward or wing, that really is a critical matchup, I think, for the whole East. When you think about, the New York Knicks, right? They have OG Anunoby, they have Mikal Bridges. The Cavaliers, they go out and trade for Lonzo Ball, who they say is a point guard. I am a Bulls fan, so I've watched a lot of, from what he was on the court. I honestly consider Lonzo Ball a little bit more wing than he gets credit for because of his positional size and what he does defensively on the wing. So the wing depth is going to be important, I think, to be competitive and really like make a hard fight for winning the East. So yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think the big holdup right now, it's been quiet in the NBA in general the past few days, is the Bradley Beal deal. We're waiting to see what that buyout looks like. Sounds like he's going to go to the Clippers, but nothing is certain. The Bucks have been one of the teams linked to him. Maybe if they get him, they're like, okay, well, maybe we just play a little bit smaller this season. Maybe we rotate between Beal, Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green, just switching through a roster, because right now it's a very versatile roster. You can, play a little positionless basketball, but I'd feel a bit more comfortable if they just got a true small forward in there, however you're going to get them.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a question that comes to mind, just riffing a bit more on that small forward point. The ideal formula seemed to have been, as far as a Giannis roster, right? It's effectively like surround Giannis with the highest tier of defense and shooters possible. And perhaps Beal can give you some of that shooting. I just don't know if he would necessarily be how much you could expect from him on the defensive front. Like, is there a world where the Bucks look for defense in the trade market, or is it something where like there just has to be some internal development there where guys just have to step up and be able to defend to that level that the Bucks have had in the past?
I think it could be a little bit of both, but I certainly think they're always looking at trade. They're always looking at the market, whether it is trade or free agency. Like, they probably didn't think that Miles Turner thing was going to happen, but it did. So you never really know what they're up to. If somebody becomes available, somebody's available behind the scenes, they'll call. They always call. They're always aggressive, but they're probably looking at a lot of internal development as well. AJ Green is somebody they're high on. He's probably going to get extended soon here, it sounds like, hopefully, because he's a nice young player. Doesn't get a lot of credit for his defense, but he is a good defender. Gary Trent Jr. showed a lot of signs. Would be great to see him continue to take on some of those tougher assignments. Ryan Rollins was a guy that burst onto the scene, showed some real promise as a defender. So they're going to ask a lot of the guys they have to take on some tough defensive assignments. There's no designated primary defender. Like when the Bucks won the title, it was, we'll throw PJ Tucker at him. PJ Tucker will go after KD. He'll go after Booker, Trae Young, whatever we got to do. This year, it feels like it's just going to be more by committee. They want to play that versatile, switchable defense. So they're going to ask a lot of guys to step up, but at the same time, wouldn't be surprised if they went out there and made a move for a guy who, has that reputation on defense that he could come in and help.
Yeah. Do you envision the lineup possibility of seeing both Turner and Bobby Portis take the floor with Giannis? And just thinking out loud about the point you make about the small forward need, certainly Giannis could play that role. And it seems like this past season, Doc Rivers is putting the ball in his hand more. So you could potentially have like that point forward kind of setup for Giannis with both Portis and Turner is a compliments in the front court, and they both can shoot, so that helps.
I think we're going to see a lot of wacky lineups this season. I'll tell you that. Not only just because Doc Rivers is there, but because of the front court adjustments. Not only did they bring in Miles Turner, but they re-signed Portis, they re-signed Jericho Sims, and those are all guys that you can kind of mix and match with Giannis and just in different lineups. So I certainly think we could see some with Portis and Turner. Like you said, the shooting is really good. So I could see that. Giannis is going to play, kind of like you mentioned, that point guard role this season. Unlike past years when you had Bledsoe, Holiday, Lillard, there's not really going to be a true point guard on that roster, barring some last-second move here. It's going to be Giannis, combo guards, forwards, and bigs. There's not going to be a Cole Anthony, I guess you could say, but we'll see how much of him that we really see on the floor. I feel like he'll be, a second unit spark plug, but the most responsibility is going to be on Giannis. So we're going to see a lot of weird lineups, and I'm all for it. Let's see what Portis and Miles Turner can do on the court with Giannis. If that's too big, just switch it out. They're going to have a lot of versatile options. So curious to see, but any combination of players on that roster, I would not be surprised to see on the floor this season.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good segue too into certainly Giannis dominated the headlines even before the conclusion of the Bucks season and there's always been sort of like this kind of like implicit expectation that at some point Giannis is going to want to move on to a new franchise. Hasn't happened at this point. Seems like it's not going to happen. From your point of view, like how would you like if you were to somehow give like a Giannis State of the Union address, like where is Giannis at this point in terms of like the not just like the trade rumor stuff, but just like in terms of like where his game is right now for the Milwaukee Bucks and what he's contributing on the court, like what have you seen that like what are you seeing or where you like what's your read on Giannis at this point?
Well, a couple things on that. Kind of like what the Bucks president said on he was doing a summer league broadcast the other day, and when they asked him about the Giannis rumors, he said, we kind of laugh internally about what some of these analysts and insiders are trying to paint this picture as with Giannis because they feel really good about him. And that's always been my stance as well. He wants to be in Milwaukee, and as long as they show that, hey, we're going to go out here and try to win a title every single year, I'm going to stay. And I think that only kind of has increased with how recently we see how the trade market is. Like if a team traded for Giannis, they're going to give up a lot to get him to the point where they're not going to have a lot left. They're going to be in the same position as Milwaukee, unless that team was this past offseason, Houston or San Antonio, because I felt like those were probably the two, or Oklahoma City, but they won the title, so I didn't really count them. But those are the three teams that could put together a package and like still be a top tier contender afterward. Everybody else is like, okay, you got Giannis, but you just gave up your best assets and players to get him. So it's never really seemed likely. He's never been the guy to ask out. He's always said, I don't really want to ask out. That's not something I could see myself doing. So I think it's good. I think he's going to stay right where he is. It's always kind of felt like that. But on the court, like we just talked about, I think we're going to see a little bit of a different Giannis this season. Not going to be that pure point guard there. It's going to be him a lot. You'll see guys like Ryan Rollins or Kevin Porter Jr. bring the ball up sometimes, but I think we're going to see point Giannis for a good chunk of the year, and I would bet a lot of money that we're going to see a career high in assists because his passing, the most underrated part of his game, for sure. Everybody loves the dunks. The mid-range got some love this past year, but he can really see the floor. He can find guys when they're cutting. He finds guys when they're wide open from three, so I think we're going to see a lot of point Giannis, and a lot of people are picking him for under-the-radar MVP, and I might be with them. We're going to see a different Giannis this season.
Certainly, yeah. If Giannis is, if you're seeing an uptick in his assist numbers, that's going to help him as well. And I'm glad you touched on that point about Giannis is, he's been more intentional. He's given more love to the mid range. That could be a potent weapon as a functioning in a point guard role, right? Because he gets if you're in that mid range spot, there's a lot of things you can do from that. People like I like 3-point shot, and I'm totally on board with the modern NBA. I do think that there's sometimes just like tried and true fundamentals of basketball that just get pushed under the rug of the collective conscience of NBA fans because it's constantly being drilled in people's head. They're like, the most efficient shot is the 3-point shot and layups at the rim, which is statistically true. At the same time, it's like there's the art and there's the science of basketball. I think the art of basketball is still like when your top 10, 15 players, they should be able to do things in the mid-range. And it's not just pull-up jumpers, but like if you play make from the mid-range, that's where you get defenses in the rotation. That's where you start to create these opportunities for all these other sort of like, complementary role players.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've built a roster to kind of do that point Giannis thing to, I don't want to say to perfection because we are still waiting to see if they do the whole small forward thing. But, you got your combo guards in Ryan Rollins, Kevin Porter Jr. You do have Cole Anthony, who's more of a pure point guard. You got Gary Trent, AJ Green, 3-point specialist, can just wait out on the perimeter, camping for that open look. Got Bobby Portis, Miles Turner, guys who can also space the floor but also work on the interior. So going to be an interesting roster. Going to be interesting to see how they all fit and if they do thrive with this point Giannis role.
Yeah. Here's a thought too. In some ways, like when you guys had Drew Holiday, certainly he's a point guard, but also Drew Holiday is not like the typical point guard. I almost would suspect, is just thinking out loud again, if there were a point guard addition to make, I mean, it seems like finding a point guard that can really be a point of attack defender of a high or reliable tier. I mean, that probably would be a good addition as well.
Yeah. The biggest difference between Drew Holiday and Damian Lillard with the point guard eras there, and even Eric Bledsoe, was that Holiday and Bledsoe were guys that could really make an impact without the ball because they could just focus on the defense. Now, they both had their offensive issues in the playoffs especially, but all defense guys in Milwaukee. So they could certainly make an impact without the ball. And while Lillard tried on defense, a lot of people give him they rag on him a little bit for his defense, but he always tried. That was one thing that he put a lot of effort, even if he didn't get the stop, always put forth a lot of effort, but he was never an all-defensive guy. He was never going to be. So that kind of hindered the fit a little bit. That certainly made things a bit tougher. Brook Lopez's defense got a little bit less impactful because he didn't have those stout point-of-attack defenders on the perimeter to slow down the guy before they got to the hoop where he could swat it away. So, yeah, you can never have too many point-of-attack defenders. I do think in the backcourt, they really like what Ryan Rollins gives them in that regard. He's got that long wingspan, showed this past year that he can really take on some tough matchups. But the same goes for pretty much everybody else back there. Kevin Porter Jr. showed some real defense. AJ Green, like I said, gets a bad whistle sometimes, but he's also a really sturdy defender, can match up with guys bigger than him. Gary Trent Jr., he's a hound. So they got a lot of quality options. And even Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma's defense really wasn't his problem in Milwaukee. So, it was kind of everything else, the offense, the missing the layups, just the weird turnovers. So he's a solid defender as well, but I feel like if they're going to make a move, got to make a move for a defensive small forward. I couldn't exactly tell you who that is. I don't think RJ Barrett is the answer in that regard. Herb Jones would be the dream, but sounds like he's going to stay put. So I don't know right now. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'm keeping an eye out.
Yeah, certainly. Between now and the next trade deadline, I would expect the Bucks certainly be an active player in the trade market.
Yeah, absolutely. They're always lurking. They're always waiting for somebody to become available. And even the buyout market, I think they're going to, keep an eye on that. I know Washington has a bit of a roster crunch. They've shown interest in Marcus Smart before. With the addition of Cole Anthony, I don't know if they would bring in another guard. Then your guard rotation is getting kind of heavy over there, and you're really ignoring that small forward thing. But I know they've liked him in the past, so wouldn't really surprise me if they go after a guy like Marcus Smart or just a savvy veteran to add to that young point guard room, but not too old. There were some rumors about Chris Paul maybe coming to Milwaukee. Sounds like they chose Cole Anthony over him. Makes sense to me. Keep that roster younger, but we're going to see. We're going to see. They're not done yet, I don't think. So I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Let's touch on a bit with Doc Rivers. So big picture, I guess to start with, how would you grade the job he's done this past season, in terms of being head coach and what he's brought to the table? Doc Rivers can sometimes be like a polarizing figure in coach discussions, especially when it comes to playoff time a year. Where are you at with Doc Rivers and even the Bucks fan base? Like, what kind of temperature is the fan base giving him at this point?
I think we're all kind of surprised he's still there. And no disrespect to Doc, he's got the resume. He's got he's a great coach in the all-time rankings, but he's had a lot of problems since he came to Milwaukee. And the biggest one really is just kind of not realizing what he has. Like last season, Bucks fans were screaming from game one of that Pacers series, like, hey, you got to play your young and athletic guys. You can't play Brook Lopez and Taurean Prince against these Pacers because they're just going to get fried. And he kept playing them until game 5 when the Bucks were facing elimination. Now they lost that game, but it was like their best game, and they lost on that crazy, Indiana had like 8 points in the final, I don't even remember, 15 seconds or something like that. It was just something where the Bucks had no business losing that game, but they coughed it up with just foolish turnovers and all that. But it's like, where would the Bucks be had Doc Rivers made that realization at the same time that Bucks fans did? There's no telling. They maybe could have kept playing, but he's very liked within that organization. Giannis loves him. Giannis has talked about how he loves him. One of the reasons I think he's there in the first place is when the Bucks hired the coach before him, Adrian Griffin, the rumor was that Giannis wanted a former player to be the coach, somebody that he could connect with a little bit better. So makes sense to me that Giannis likes him, picking his brain about basketball. Doc was a great player. Same reason I think Darvin Ham's probably, around. He's been around for many years, but a lot of the guys in that area are former players, and it makes sense. They have a great mind for the game, but I want to see Doc Rivers maybe make some more adjustments early on. And I do think the Bucks have put a better roster there for him so he can maybe make less mistakes. There's no Brook Lopez there to leave him out there and get picked apart by the Wolves. Taurean Prince is still there, but I feel like there's an adequate amount of young guys where maybe it's like, okay, you don't have to play Taurean Prince, just go a little bit smaller. But I think something I hope at least, that's might be just optimism talking, but I hope something clicked after watching that Game 5 loss with that lineup that he rolled out. I believe it was Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., A.J. Green, Giannis, and Bobby Portis, which was one of the most efficient lineups, I believe, certainly their most efficient lineup, but one of the better ones in the entire NBA as a whole, just because of that athleticism, the versatility, the shooting. So got a small sample size of it in the playoffs. I want to see a big sample size of it this year. So I'm not so certain about Doc. I think certainly he'll be coaching for his job this year since he wasn't apparently this past year. So all eyes on Doc.
Yeah. Is it potentially a situation where Doc's successor is already sitting on the bench with him with Darvin Ham? I mean, obviously, Ham had his run in with the Lakers. So
there was a rumor. There was a rumor earlier this past offseason. I would have to look and see who it came from, but I remember that it was something about Doc maybe thinking about transitioning into a front office role and then that coaching maybe going to Darvin Ham. So, that's certainly something that would have been interesting, that would have shaken things up. But to me, if the Bucks are going to let go of Rivers, I feel like you kind of got to wipe that slate clean. No offense to Darvin Ham. He's been there even through the Bud era. He's been a coach in this league. He knows it all, but just kind of like wipe the slate clean, start over if you're going to get a new coach. But they're all in on Doc this year. Certainly don't think we're going to see a midseason shakeup or anything like that. They'll give Doc the year, and depending on how things go, we'll see where we're at this time next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I lived in Philadelphia for a few years. So I have Sixers friends, and when Doc was coaching the Sixers, it was kind of the same kind of things as far as like, oh, Doc never plays his young guys at all. It's always the vets. And it was like this, I felt like there's this running joke of like Doc's antagonism towards Paul Reed, who I think is actually, he's developed into a pretty serviceable like big. And, the Pistons probably could stand to play Paul Reed a bit more. Maybe I'm being like Philly adjacent bias there, but like, I just think like, that's something that comes to mind when you talk about like Doc not, making those adjustments sooner. Like, the tape's kind of out there, unfortunately, on him. Like it's either, there's missed adjustments with him, or it's like, this constant sort of like philosophy of like, I'm going to ride my vets until I can't ride my vets anymore.
And the problem with that is that was exactly Mike Budenholzer's issue. That was one of the reasons why I was okay with letting go of Bud when he got let go. It was like, okay, yeah, he just kind of refused to get the young guys really involved in there. Even if a veteran was having one of the worst series I've ever seen, Grayson Allen in 2022 against Boston, he rode with him until the end. So just kind of an issue. Like, I know you don't want to give up on your guys. I know you don't want to shoot their confidence down like that, but like, when they're struggling or when they're a bad matchup in the series, you got to make the adjustments, even if it's just for a series or something like that. It's like, hey, we got to change things up here. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting year for Doc.
Yeah, for sure. Just to change the gears a bit, especially with a franchise like Milwaukee, I feel like when storylines show up about Milwaukee, is usually, a Giannis rumor, or in the case of like now that Doc's been there, a few seasons, I'm sure they'll at some point there will come a moment where Doc has done something where it's going to make headlines. But I also feel like there has to be like more interesting things that the fans definitely know and the people around Milwaukee in Milwaukee know about. And I just wanted to like in that vein, like just what are the storylines about the Milwaukee Bucks that frankly deserve more attention or should be talked about more, especially like national media? Because if we're talking about a certain channel that starts with 4 letters or has 4 letters, then they're probably not spending much time digging into like what's going on with the franchise. But like this is why I created this podcast. I want to talk about real basketball and real stuff that like fans are talking about. So like, what are the interesting things about the Bucks that need more attention?
Well, there are a couple. On the one hand, it's tough to kind of talk about roster upgrades and all that because they never tell anybody. I've been covering the team through a lot of trades. The Drew Holiday trade came out of nowhere. The Bogdanovich trade that got rescinded on that same night that the Holiday trade happened. That came out of nowhere. The Damian Lillard trade certainly came out of nowhere. This Miles Turner thing came out of nowhere. So not much to talk about when it comes to upgrades because you just never know what it's going to be. But in terms of storylines we can talk about, I think just the roster shift. Everybody's saying, and I saw that network that you were talking about put up like a mock depth chart for the Bucks for next season, and it was just like completely off. Like that's not what the lineup is going to look like or anything like that. So just the youth movement, just the guys that they're bringing in there, the roster or the lineups they can throw out there, some of the growth from the young guys. Like not a lot of people know who Ryan Rollins is. And, you look at his stats, they're pretty, they're okay. He averaged like 6 points last year, 2 or 3 assists. It was nothing crazy, but it was just the growth that he showed going from a two-way player to a standard player to being a starter late in the season to the point where you're like, okay, I think we have something in this guy. And next year, I think he's going to be even better because he played most of this season with a torn shoulder and he did not get surgery on it. So he was, wearing that big brace every game, getting work done on it and still put together the best year of his career. So looking forward to seeing his growth because his defense is really good. Probably not a lot of people paying attention to that, but watch some Ryan Rollins defense. See how he guards guys with that long wingspan, with that height, how he stays in front of them. And just the growth from a lot of the young guys. AJ Green's another guy that I think is due for big things this season. I hope they extend him before the season because I think he'll be more pricey next offseason. But the biggest one I think is going to be the Miles Turner thing in general. We talked about Brook Lopez earlier. A lot of people were kind of ragging the Bucks. A lot of these analysts and just people that talk about basketball saying that, oh, is it worth that much? Is it worth that much to cut Dame and sign Miles Turner to this big deal? Yeah, if you watch the Bucks, it was pretty clear because they needed the new center. Brook Lopez, he didn't really fit what they were trying to do. And the market was so dry. There was nobody else out there that you were going to sign. Because I was like, okay, we're going to re-sign Bobby Portis and Jericho Sims. And that's probably going to be your 2-man center rotation. And you're going to have to live with that, I guess. Brook Lopez will be gone, but you will get younger and stay athletic with a guy like Sims in there. But you bring in Miles Turner, that's like the perfect Brook Lopez replacement. For years, Bucks fans have been saying, if we could get Miles Turner, that's like the perfect Brook Lopez replacement. Got the shooting. He was a block champ a couple of years ago. Like, that's exactly what you want, but he's 8-9 years younger, can move a little bit more. So a lot of people saying that signing, it's whatever. We don't really like it. Cutting Dame, yes, that hurts because you're adding an extra $20 million to your books. I get it, but just from the Miles Turner fit perspective, you couldn't have picked up a better center this offseason. So I think that's one that's being undervalued a little bit, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and just looking at Miles Turner, the contract that he signed with the Bucks, right? Like, you have Miles Turner locked in now for 3 seasons, starting with this upcoming season. Lines up perfectly with Giannis. Giannis has a player option in 27-28. So I agree with you. It's like, I don't know if the Bucks could have done better than going to get Miles Turner because you have someone that is literally on Giannis's timeline now. He brings solid rim protection. His previous block champ. Just even what we just saw a month ago in the NBA Finals. there might have been some moments perhaps where like Miles Turner has his challenges matching up with Hartenstein or Chet. But at the same time, like you can't deny his presence at the rim as a defender, and like that's incredibly valuable. Plus the fact that again he shoots the ball, so it's not you don't really play Miles Turner out the court.
Yeah. He had maybe not the greatest playoff run towards the end there, but I think he's going to be a great fit in Milwaukee. I think he's going to fit perfectly next to Giannis. I think his shooting is going to be turned up a notch, just like Brook Lopez's was as soon as he got to Milwaukee playing with that Giannis gravity. So I think Miles Turner is a huge pickup. And I will say, on the Dame point, nothing but respect for Dame. One of my happiest moments as a Bucks fan was seeing that notification that he got traded there. But the fit never really took off. And there was some talk from The Athletic that had Dame stayed healthy and the Bucks lost early in the playoffs, there was maybe going to be some talk between him and the organization of, okay, is this really the best spot? Like, do we think we fit here? So, there was going to be maybe a little bit of disconnect there, but he got hurt. And the alternative to going and getting Miles Turner was, okay, keep Dame and let him rehab and let him come back maybe next year. Maybe he misses all of next year. He did turn 35. I believe his birthday is today. But, getting up there. And it was like, okay, well, we could kind of risk that. We could be wondering about that for the next several months. And if he comes back, is he going to be happy here? Or are we going to have some conversations next summer? And who knows if you'd be able to cut him and get a Miles Turner like free agent next summer. So, it made sense. The Athletic, I believe, also reported that Dame was happy to get cut how he was so he could pick his next team. So it might work out for everybody. But yeah, so that's another little wrinkle that goes in there is Dame potentially a trade maybe going to happen had he stayed healthy. That's something I haven't seen a lot of other people bring up, but something I feel like needs mentioning because it's not like Dame was like, oh yeah, I'll be here for life and all that stuff. So that's something that gets a little forgotten.
Yeah, that's a good reference point because I like thinking back to the whole saga of like, when Dame was still in Portland, right? And all of this sort of like Cold War standoff between the Trailblazers and the Heat on getting the deal done. By most accounts, like Dame, I go back to it and double check myself, but the sentiment I seem to remember is that basically like Dame is either going to Miami or he doesn't want to go anywhere else. And somehow, to your point, right, the Bucks make a Dame trade happen when nobody expected that. So I guess it's not unreasonable to question like how much appetite was Dame ever going to really have in Milwaukee, period.
Yeah.
If that wasn't like his original destination.
Yeah, the way I've heard about it is that Miami just couldn't get a deal done. They just could not agree with Portland, and then Dame's agent was kind of like, okay, well, what do you think about Brooklyn or Milwaukee? And Milwaukee seemed to be captivating to him, and he said, maybe we could go to Milwaukee, but like you said, not his first choice. Was always something lingering in the back of the minds of Bucks fans everywhere was, okay, well, does he really want to be here? And to his credit, no disrespect to him, I don't want anybody to think that I'm undervaluing him or anything like that. He came back from that blood clot, put it all in the line to help the Bucks in the playoffs this year. Nothing but respect for that. But, there were reports out there that maybe the fit wasn't trending to staying together for the foreseeable future had he not gotten hurt. So sounds like he's happy to be able to go choose where he goes. I don't know where that's going to be. Sounds like maybe Boston's on the table, Golden State, maybe closer to family, maybe back to Portland. Who knows? But it felt like they were maybe trending toward a split, and they have. So,
yeah, the Boston fit would be interesting. Boston is an interesting that's a franchise that I have a lot of question marks this year about because obviously, they're not going to have Tatum this season. So you would think, okay, they don't have Tatum. So, yeah, Tyler probably not going to have him, but, they're at least stay competitive. Just my own editorial, I feel like they're kind of like shadow tanking with some of these moves. Like, I just wouldn't be surprised if they're not a top 6 team. It might be a hot take at this moment. I have to meditate on that a bit more. But it's just like these are my instant reactions to like what I've seen from the Celtics so far this offseason. And I think this is going to be a volatile East as well. The Hawks are loading up. I think the Hawks are going to become like a new power in the East. and less intense. I think there might be a bubbling up of the Washington Wizards to where maybe they're playing team this year. Like I just think there's gonna be a lot of changes in the East where like I'm very curious like where do the Celtics see themselves for this year, and if they were to go get Dame, like what is that really signaling? Because on one hand, like if it was Dame going to the Celtics with the full complement of that Celtics roster, the Celtics just reloading and trying to go for it again. I would kind of wonder, like, if Dame were to go there, is that just an opportunity for Dame to feel comfortable there, get run? Like, I don't know. It's just like I will have a lot more questions if I see Dame in a Boston Celtics uniform.
Yeah, him and Tatum are good friends. That is one thing that I keep hearing is that him and Tatum are good friends. They both got the Achilles tears. This could allow them to rehab in that facility, maybe build up some chemistry. But for Boston, I think this is going to be a reloading year. I've also heard from, I can't remember who said it now, but Anthony Simons might also get rerouted if Boston can get off of him, maybe save some more money. Not exactly sure what they're looking for in that type of deal, but it's not certain that he's going to be there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made a couple more moves and didn't flat out tank, but maybe took this year to be like, okay, well, we'll see if we can sell a little bit and recoup some assets, maybe make some moves next summer, because I don't know if Tatum's going to play at all next year. And if they do sign Lillard, I don't know if he's going to play at all next year. And if you bring Lillard in, maybe you bring him in on a 2-year deal, let him recover this year, be like next year, hey, let's get after it. So, but to your other point, yeah, the East is wide open. I have no idea how it's going to look. Obviously, Cleveland and New York are going to be the favorites because they are the healthy teams. They were pretty good in the playoffs this past season. But after that, it's like, maybe Milwaukee can get up to a 3 seed if they're good enough. Paul George just had surgery. I believe that was reported today that he had surgery. He's going to be out until training camp. We'll see how he looks with that. But, a lot of other teams, you don't really know. You don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think I have question marks about the Knicks, the New York Knicks too. I live in New York, so constantly hearing the buzz about the Knicks around town. I just have personal experience as a Bulls fan. Like, there's usually a you fire Tibbs and you get a hangover from that kind of dynamic. And Mike Brown's a great coach. I just don't know how. Like, I don't know if Mike Brown's going to be somehow replicating just the effort that Tom Thibodeau traditionally gets out of his rosters, despite whatever limitations that roster might have. Like, I think there might be at least a feeling out year. I could be wrong. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I don't know about the Knicks necessarily being like, they have the talent for sure, but I just feel like with Mike making that coaching change, especially after that run they just had, there's going to be like some sort of ramp up or reorientation that has to happen with that roster.
That was a weird one to me. That change was a weird one, just because they'd finally broken through and gotten to the conference finals. And I know people were mad that Tibbs would play his guys all the excessive minutes and all that, but they were close, and it felt like we'll see what Mike Brown does. But I didn't love that when it happened. I was a bit confused about that. But maybe Mike Brown comes in and he's their guy. Maybe he's good. Maybe he gets them to the finals instead of just the conference finals. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. No, this is there's a lot of great ground. I'm glad you mentioned what you mentioned about Ryan Rollins and AJ Green, because AJ, I saw a good amount of film on AJ Green, so I agree with you. I think he's an up and comer for you guys. And then Ryan Rollins as well. So it's good to just be able to, pun intended, change the narrative about teams and franchises, right? Like, there's just all these great things that I think every basketball team has to offer in terms of, like, if you truly love the game, or you're just interested in learning more about, what's going on around the league, there's stories like these. So definitely glad to hear that from you and publish, promote that here. I guess just to wrap it up, I want to certainly give you opportunities to plug where people can find you, the work that you have out there. And again, just thank you for hopping on tonight.
Anytime. Yeah, I needed to get out some Bucks thoughts. Always good to hop on and talk about the Bucks. You can find me on Twitter at @cell_Dalton. All my work is on Behind the Buck Pass, part of the Fan-Sided Network. if you're looking for some good Buck stuff, go on over to either of them. I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, everybody check out Behind the Bucks Pass. Follow Dalton on X. Follow Behind the Buck Pass on X as well. Right, what is it? Behind the Buck?
Yep, you got it. Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely we'll want to have you back once we get into the thick of the season and just be able to see some of these things we talked about tonight. How are they looking, especially in the trade market?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to come back.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. And then just for me, what I will plug, of course, I encourage everybody, please subscribe to Narratives Per Possession here on YouTube, but then also check out our Patreon community where we have a lot of great content out there. We have a weekly newsletter. We have columns out there. Also starting to push out member exclusive content as well. So if you join, which you can join for free, not charging any dough on that. So join for free and get cool content on top of the stuff that everybody gets. So yeah, hit us up on Patreon, and we're also out here on X. So follow us at Narratives Per Possession, which is Narratives Per 75 on X as well. All right. Thank you again, Dalton. Really appreciate you having you on tonight. And yeah, look forward to hearing more about what's going on with the Bucks from you.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, man.